Back in session, parties and council are present, all members of our jury or alternates are present. I believe both sides have concluded with the testimony with the witness, Sergeant Smith, who was on the stand yesterday, correct?
Correct.
Yes?
Yes.
Defense? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So people can call your next witness.
The people would call Detective Dan Hanke.
Do you solemnly state the evidence you're giving tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your full name, spell it for the record.
Daniel Hanke, D-A-N-I-E-L-H-A-N-K-E.
Okay?
Thank you. Good morning. What is your current employment?
I am a sergeant for the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department.
How long have you been employed by the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department?
Almost 14 years.
And what was your assignment in 2014?
I was assigned as a homicide detective.
And were you assigned to assist in the investigation of the McStay family?
Yes, I was.
And as part of your investigation, did you learn that the defendant had told Detective Dugal that he had met with Joseph at Chick-fil-A on February 4th of 2010?
That is correct.
Did you go to the Chick-fil-A that they supposedly met at?
Yes.
And what was your purpose for going there?
My purpose with going to Chick-fil-A was to find out if they had any video surveillance of the business, of the outside and of the inside, and how long they kept the video surveillance on file for.
And were you able to obtain any video surveillance from February 4th of 2010?
No, I was not.
Why not?
It was a franchise business, and they contracted with a third party.
Objection, foundation of hearsay.
Sustained.
You were not able to obtain any video footage, though, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. And as part of your investigation, did you also have contact with Intuit and more specifically with QuickBooks?
Yes,
Did you interview Ryan Baker?
I did.
And back when you interviewed Ryan Baker, did you inform him that you were actually working a homicide investigation?
I did. I explained that I was working a homicide investigation, that it was a murder, and that it was important to put these pieces together for my investigation.
Why did you tell him that?
To be honest with you, with the culture of social media, defense attorneys, people don't trust law enforcement, especially with just the culture, and especially with being a large murder investigation, people don't want to be involved. And so then how important it is for them to talk to me. And they're very apprehensive usually, but once I explain the significance of the interview, then they understand and they're willing to usually talk to me.
During that interview that you had with Ryan Baker, did you ever prep him and talk to him about how important his testimony would be in the case?
I did not speak to him about testifying.
Now, you had information when you spoke to him that there were 2 calls that were made to QuickBooks. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And what were the date of those 2 calls?
The first call was February 8th, 2010.
And do you remember the approximate time of that call?
I don't recall the time, no.
And when was the next call made?
The next call was made the next day, February 9th, 2010.
And do you recall the time of that call?
I'm sorry, I don't recall the time.
Did you receive any user notes from Ryan Baker in terms of screenshots that he had taken of his interaction during that particular phone call?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 424.
May I see it, please?
And if you could tell me, take a look at this and tell me if you recognize that.
Yes, these are the records that Ryan Baker provided as notes he took during the phone call.
Okay, and do those screenshots indicate a time that he received the phone call on February 9th?
There's a time, but I don't know if that's the time he received or the time the call ended.
Okay, let me take that for just a moment. Down at the bottom of the last page of that exhibit, do you see some notes that Ryan Baker made with respect to the call?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and what time were those notes, what time does that reflect?
The time reflects in the screenshot of February 9th, 2010 at 08:06 a.m. and to February 9th, 2010 to 08:13.
Okay, and then also contained in there, did you receive copies of the emails that Ryan Baker sent out to Joseph McStay?
The emails are included in the notes.
And the screenshots that you
Yeah.
have? Okay,
I'm sorry, yes.
okay. Now additionally, as part of your investigation, did you actually receive some clones of accounts belonging to Earth Inspired Products?
That's correct.
And can you tell us how you actually received those clones?
Absolutely. I authored a search warrant that was signed, and I sent a copy of the search warrant to Intuit QuickBooks. I was contacted by a legal team member who provided me a login and password, which had two cloned accounts involved in the two business accounts of Earth Inspired Products.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about once you received those clones. Tell us what they look like.
So normally, and I'll explain, normally records are given on a CD. If I write a request to a bank, maybe get a stack of records or a file or something like that. In this case, it wasn't. It was log on to a QuickBooks website from a desktop computer. Once I logged on, it had links, copied, cloned links that I was not able to modify or change in any way, but I had to view the dashboard, and each screen I had to screenshot. So I screenshot what was contained in those files, so the vendors, the transactions, the checks, the audit logs. I went through each account and took screenshots of both.
Okay, so when you actually logged in, did they provide you with a particular username and password?
They did. They provided me with the username. I believe I set up my own password, but the username they provided me was Detective Dan Hanke.
Okay, so after you log in, tell us what you see on the screen.
So as I logged in, it said user Detective Dan Hanke. There's an audit log where it shows sign-ins and sign-outs. They did that so it didn't appear that somebody else was accessing the account. They wanted to be very clear that it was myself accessing the account during the investigation.
Let me stop you right there. Before you actually get into the audit log,
Yes.
before you actually get into the accounts, how is it that you access, you indicated that there were a couple of accounts. How
Yes.
do you differentiate and access between the two accounts?
Okay, I apologize. There was two links. I clicked on the first link, and then it brought up a dashboard where it had account information. I clicked on that account information, which had username, master administrator, address, and an email associated to that account.
So it essentially brings you to the home screen, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and so you are actually seeing data that the account holder would see, is that right?
Yes, they gave me access as I was a QuickBook user, and I saw the dashboard, how I would look for the user.
Okay, and were you able to modify those accounts in any way?
No, I was not able to.
Could you copy the accounts to be able to go through them on a separate CD?
No, there was no way to copy it. It was an online subscription, so there was no way to copy data and transfer it. So like I said, I had to go through and take snipping tool, and I did screenshots.
How many pages are we talking about?
A lot, over 1,000.
So there were 2 accounts, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so when you say over 1,000, was that for one account or for both?
I believe one account had almost 900 pages, and the other one had a few hundred pages. I don't recall exactly how many.
Okay, so you literally make a screenshot of that and print out every single page?
Yes.
Okay. Now, going through the clones of the account, you indicated that there were 2 accounts, right?
That's correct.
And did you find email addresses associated with each account?
Yes, I did.
And let's start with the account that was created the earliest. What account was that?
That account, the first account that was opened in September of 2006. The master administrator was Joseph McStay. The email associated to that was contact, CONTACT, @earthinspiredproducts.com.
Now, when you went through that account, were you able to determine who the master administrator was for that account?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was the master administrator for that account?
Joseph McStay.
Was there anybody else listed as an administrator on that account?
No, there was not.
And were you able to determine, by looking at the records, what that account was used for?
Yes.
Can you tell us what it appeared to you that that account was used for?
Objection is foundation hearsay.
Sustain this claim for speculation and conclusion.
Did you see invoices with respect to the business in there?
Yes.
And did you also see any type of personal finances in there?
Yes, there was checks.
Objection is the foundation again.
Overruled.
There were checks related to business accounts, payments received, invoices, and also personal checks that appeared like gas bill. It appeared that it was an online checkbook, essentially.
Now, could you tell if that side, the contact side, was actually tied to a bank account?
There was no bank accounts associated, so it was literally, like I said, just an online checking account balances, a way to create invoices and create checks.
Now, you indicated also that you had access to a vendor list for that particular side of the account. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as 421.
No, it's object is hearsay.
Overruled.
And if you can take a look at the first 4 pages of this exhibit and tell me if you recognize that. Just the first 4 pages.
I'm sorry. Yes, I do.
Okay, and can you tell us what this is?
That is a vendor contact list.
And this was from the contact side of the account, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in your review of this particular document, during your review of this particular document, did you determine if there were some vendors that were of interest to you?
Yes, there was 2 vendors of interest to me.
Okay, and looking at this first page, if you can, is there a laser pointer up there by you?
I think so.
And can you tell us what it was about this particular document and what vendor that was of interest to you?
Yes. The first vendor, you can see on the lower bottom where I'm pointing my laser, is the name Charles Merritt.
Okay, and then you indicated that there was also another vendor.
That's correct. I believe it's on the next page.
And what else did you see that was of interest to you in this vendor list?
If you see where I'm pointing my laser, and there's another vendor, I designed Chase.
Now, did you have an opportunity to review an audit log or an activity log that was contained on the contact side of the account?
Yes.
Were you able to determine from that when Charles Merritt was added as a vendor?
I know iDesign was added in 2006, but I don't recall the date of Charles Merritt was added. I believe it was 2009.
Okay. And when you went through the contact side of the account, were there payments to iDesign?
Yes.
And when did those payments start?
I believe the first check occurred in June of 2006. There was a check written to iDesign Chase for, I believe, $6,000.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you for just a second. When you testified a few minutes ago, you told us that the contact side of the account appeared to have started in September of 2006. So you just indicated to us that there was a check that was written to Chase, or iDesign Chase, in June of 2006.
I'm sorry, I think I got that dates mixed up.
Okay, so which date are we referring to?
I believe the check was written in June of 06. I believe the account was, and if I could refer to my report, I'd be able to tell you, I believe the account was opened in 2005.
If that would refresh your recollection, with
Yes.
the court's permission.
Sure.
Okay, yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I misspoke in my testimony. It was September of 2005. If I said 2006, that was an error.
Okay, and when you were reviewing the vendor log, did you also see an entry in there at all for Metro Sheet Metal?
Yes, there was
I think
a,
if you can show
Oh,
where that
I'm
is
sorry.
located on the list behind you.
at the bottom of the screen, you can see a vendor that states Metro Sheet Metal Co.
Now, when you went through these particular vendors, did it appear to you that whomever created this list had a habit of capitalizing the vendors?
Objection, argumentative, leading, and relevant.
Sustained as upon speculation and conclusion, last phrase.
Did you notice any lowercase vendors in this list?
I believe out of 26 pages, there was one vendor that was lowercase.
Now, did you also see checks made out to Metro Sheet Metal on the contact side as well?
Yes, I saw checks made out to Metro Sheet Metal in December of 2009.
And did it appear to you from your review of those checks that those were also capitalized?
Yes, ma'am.
And on the contact side of the account, were you able to review the activity log?
Yes.
Did you see, prior to February 4th of 2010, did you see if there were any checks that had been deleted?
There were 2 checks deleted to Metro Sheet Metal and then rewritten moments later.
Okay.
And I believe that was December of 2009.
Now, in your review of the contact side of the account, were you able to determine when Joseph McStay last used the account in February of 2010?
Yes, the last date I saw with activity was an invoice on February 2nd, 2010.
Okay. I can have just a moment. show you what's been marked as 856. And do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell us what that is?
That is an activity log for the contact side.
Okay. And you indicated that on February 2nd, there was an invoice that was added. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then, is that what we see reflected here on that February 2nd date?
Yeah, it's a little hard to see. There.
Is that
Yeah, that's a little bit
11:59?
better. Yeah,
Okay.
that's better.
Okay, and is that what you were referring to?
At 11:59 on the 2nd, user Joseph McStay added customer Bob Crayley.
Okay, and then there's no activity on the account again until May 19th of 2010. Is that what's reflected?
That's correct.
Now, were you also able to access the second side of, you indicated there were two accounts. Were you able to access the second account?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the email address that was associated with that account?
The email address was custom, C-U-S-T-O-M, at earthinspiredproducts.com.
Were you able to determine who the master administrator was for the custom side of the account?
Yes, it was Joseph McStay.
Was anybody else listed as a secondary administrator or anything like that?
No, ma'am.
Now, when you reviewed the contents of the custom side of the account, was it significantly smaller than the documents that were contained on the contact side of the account?
Yes, it was.
And what were the differences that you noticed?
As I testified earlier, the contact side was open in 2005. The custom side was open in January of 2009. So it had much fewer vendors, transactions.
Let me show you 422. And do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us what that is?
That is a vendor list for the custom side.
Now, it says contact list at the top, but is it your testimony that this is actually from the custom side?
Yeah, if you see, it says vendor contact list. That's not the account. It's just a vendor contact with 4 vendors added. But this is from the custom at earthinspiredproducts.com account.
Okay, and we see just the 4 vendors. Was that all that there was?
That's correct.
And were you able to determine, we see Charles Merritt there, were you able to determine when he actually had been added as a vendor?
Yes, ma'am. He was added as a vendor on February 1st, 2010.
Yeah, I'm going to show you 423. And if you can tell me if you recognize what that is.
Yes, ma'am.
What is that?
That is the activity log for the custom account.
And if you can show us on here where you see that Mr. Merritt or Charles Merritt was added as a vendor. You indicated it was February 1st.
Yes, ma'am. On February 1st, 2010 at 12:24 p.m., user Joseph McStay added vendor Charles Merritt, all lowercase letters.
And when you say user Joseph McStay, you don't know who's behind the computer, right?
I know.
Okay, it just automatically populates that account as Joseph McStay if somebody's signed in that way?
If someone logged in the account, it shows Joseph McStay. You'll see later where I logged in as Detective Dan Hanke.
Okay, well, we can actually take a look at that right now. Just to show the difference. Is this what you're referring to? Page 1 of the exhibit?
Yes, on September 26th, 2014, Intuit added user Detective Dan Hanke and then sent me an email invitation to that account.
Now, we see another vendor there of Metro Sheet Metal. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have an opportunity to review the activity log to determine when Metro Sheet Metal was added as a vendor?
I did, but I don't recall the exact date.
Okay, well, let me show you the actual exhibit 423. And you testified that this was from the custom side, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I can direct you to the second page.
Okay.
Did that refresh your recollection as to when Metro Sheet Metal was added as a vendor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and when was that?
It was February 5th, 2010 at 12:19 p.m.
Try what time?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It was February 5th, 2010 at 12:19 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, you indicated earlier that there had been checks written or recorded to some degree on the contact side of the account, that there were both personal and professional checks, right?
Yeah, there were numerous checks created on the contact side.
And was the custom side different?
Yes.
How so?
Prior to February 1st, 2010, there had never been a check written on that account.
Were you able to determine if the custom account was actually linked to a bank account?
It was similar to the contact one. It was just for invoices, but there was not any bank associated.
Now, when you review the actual cloned account and you look at the activity log that we had just looked at a few moments ago, are you able to find details about the particular checks that had been written?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to show you just a stack of exhibits and ask you if you recognize those. Okay, and starting first with exhibit 425, do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us what that document is?
That is an audit history of a check that was created on February 1st, 2010.
Okay, and I'm going to show you 426 and ask if you recognize that.
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
It is another audit history for a check created on February 1st, 2010.
And is it different than the audit history for the other check?
Yes, the times are different.
Can I ask you to keep them in order for me, please? That's okay?
Which one do you want? This one?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
And showing you 427, do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
It is an audit history for a check transaction created on February 2nd, 2010.
Okay. Showing you 428, do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us what that is?
It is another audit history of a check transaction created on February 2nd, 2010.
And is it different than the other one that you just looked at in 427?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Showing you 429, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is that?
It is a audit history of a check transaction created on February 4th, 2010.
And Exhibit 430, do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is that?
A audit trail of a check transaction created on February 5th, 2010.
Objection cumulative, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Cumulative.
Oh,
Showing you what's been marked as 431, do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us what that is?
It is a audit history of a check transaction created on February 5th, 2010.
And is it different than the one that we looked at in the previous exhibit of 430?
Yes.
And showing you 432, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is that?
It is a audit history of a check transaction created on February 5th, 2010.
And is that different than the other two that you just looked at in 430 and 431?
Yes.
Showing you 433, do you recognize that?
Yes.
Can you tell us what that is?
It is a audit history of a check transaction created on February 5th, 2010.
And is it different than the other ones that you just looked at that were created on February 5th?
Yes, ma'am.
And showing you 434, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is that?
It is a audit history of a check transaction created on February 5th, 2010.
And are those different, is that different than the other ones that you looked at?
Yes.
Okay, and then showing you 435, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is that?
It is an audit history of a check transaction created on February 8th, 2010.
Okay. Now, in order to obtain these audit histories, how did you have to, or what did you have to do to get the audit histories?
On the activity log, there is invoices, there's the sign-ins, and then also when a check is created, in the actual activity log, it creates a link or a hyperlink. So there was a blue link I was able to click on, and it gave me the audit history of the actual check that was created.
And just as an example, using what's been marked as 425, without going through it in detail, but is this what you were seeing in your audit history?
Can you shrink it a little bit? No, make it, I'm sorry, make it smaller. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and we see,
Let me interrupt you for a minute before we start going into the details. We'll go ahead and take our noon recess at this time till 1:30 this afternoon. Keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case, or allow anyone to discuss the case with you or in your presence. And we'll see everyone back at 1:30.
Yes, I recognize it.
and what is that?
This is a computer-generated check dated 2/2/2010 to Charles Merritt, all lowercase letters, for $2,495. And the memo states deposit SA1001.
Okay, and did you have an opportunity to observe if this check actually had been cashed? see if I can zoom out a little bit.
Yes, the check was cashed.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about that we had just discussed was we went through several check numbers that had the same number on it, which was that 4093. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And did you find any particular check numbers that you recall that were cashed that actually had that check number on it?
I don't recall numbers. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
And this one, though, that matched up, despite the fact that we looked at that audit history which had the check number of 4093 in it, we see a different check number here. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, but it has the same memo line, same dollar amount, and same name, and same date?
That's correct.
Okay. And then moving on to Exhibit 429. I'll probably have to zoom in a little more for you now. And you testified previously that this was an audit history that you reviewed. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay, and can you tell us what's contained in this one?
Yes, on February 4, 2010, at 7:59 p.m., user Joseph McStay added a check dated 2/4/2010 for $4,000. The status was to be printed. The memo line is Paul Mitchell, and the name is Charles Merrick.
And then there's no indirect audit history with this particular check. Is that correct?
I believe the check was just added. There's no other times, and the next thing says that it was deleted.
This is Exhibit 429. And did you have any information that this particular check had been cashed?
I don't believe the check was cashed.
And then moving on to Exhibit 430. If you can tell us about this particular check.
Yes. There's a lot more there's a lot more edit history on this. That's why you see the different times. The first time you see is February 5th, 2010 at 12:06 p.m. It was a typed check. Date is 2/5/2010. Amount was $4,500. The status was to be printed. There was no check number associated at this edit. The memo line was Paul Mitchell, and it was made out to Charles Merrick.
And then moving on to the next portion, we see an indirect edit. If you can explain to us what happens in that indirect edit.
Yes, ma'am. In this edit, the check number was changed, and I believe it's 4093,
And then a check was printed.
And then the next edit, if you can tell us what happens there.
yes, at 12:14, the check number was deleted,
And the status was to be printed.
And moving on to the next indirect edit.
the edit shows a check number 4093,
And also check printed.
And the next edit contained within that check series.
The status changed to be printed. And the check number was deleted.
And the next edit.
the number 4093 was added,
And the check was printed.
And moving on to the next edit, if you can tell us what's contained there.
yes, on this one, February 5th, 2010, 12:22 p.m., the check number was deleted. The date was changed to 2/4/2010, and the check status went to be printed.
then moving on to the final edits, if you can tell us what's contained there.
Yeah, so February 5th, 2010 at 12:23, states it's a check dated 2/4/2010, the amount of $4,500, memo line Paul Mitchell, and it looks like a check number changed to 4095, and the check was printed.
And then what's the last part of that check history?
The last edit at 12:38, the check was deleted.
And then showing you what's been marked as 420E. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me what that is?
It is a computer-generated check from Earth Inspired Products paid to Charles Merritt in the amount of $4,500 with the memo line Paul Mitchell, and that was dated 2/4/2010.
Okay. And were you able to determine if this check had been cashed?
Yes, this check was cashed.
And does it contain the same information that we observed in Exhibit 430 with respect to the memo line, the name, and the dollar amount?
Yes, the name, memo line, dollar amount matched, the check numbers did not match.
Okay, and when we went through Exhibit 430, we saw that the audit history captured those transactions as occurring on February 5th of 2010, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so this check, you noted on one of the indirect edits, had actually been changed with respect to the date, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that check number we saw, though, was 4095, so this is an actual different check number than the one that was contained in the history?
It's a different check number, physical check number than what QuickBooks records show.
Showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 431. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, and can you tell us when this check was created?
Yes, this check was created on February 5th, 2010 at 12:21 p.m. The type is check. The date is 2/4/2010. The amount is $1,650, $1,650. The check status is to be printed. The memo is miscellaneous manufacturer. And the name is Metro Sheet Metal.
I'm sorry, this is 431. If you can tell us what the indirect edit was that had occurred with respect to this check.
The edit at 12:21 shows a check number of 4094,
And the check was printed.
Okay, and then what's the last part of this audit history that we see at the top?
the last part of the audit history is on February 5th, 2010 at 12:39.
The check was deleted.
And showing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 420D. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me what that is?
Yes, it is a computer-generated check from Earth Inspired Products paid to the order of Metro Sheet Metal for $1,650 for miscellaneous manufacturing.
Were you able to determine if this actual check had been cashed as well?
Yes, this check was cashed.
Okay, and again, we see that same information from the audit history that that check had actually occurred on February 5th, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do we see a different check number as well?
Yes, ma'am. The check number shows 4236.
That the same information as was contained in the audit history for QuickBooks, is that correct?
All of their information is the same as the QuickBooks.
And showing you 432, can you tell us when this check was created?
Yes, ma'am. Excuse me. On February 5th, 2010, at 12:25 p.m., user Joseph McStay added a check dated 2/4/2010. The amount was $250. Check printed was to be printed. The status, I'm sorry, was to be printed. There was no check number associated. The memo line said copper, and it was made out to Metro Sheet Metal.
And if you could tell us about the indirect edit that we see here in the audit history?
Yes, on February 5th at 12:26, a check number was added. I believe it's 4095, and it was printed.
And then the last part of that audit history?
On February 5th, 2010 at 12:38, it was deleted.
Showing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 420F. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
That is a computer-generated check.
And were you able to determine if this check had been cashed?
Yes, ma'am.
And we see the same sort of situation in this particular check where the audit history actually reflects February 5th.
That's correct.
And is the check number different as well?
Yes, and everything on the check is the same from the QuickBooks records except the check number.
Showing you what's been marked as 433. Can you tell us when this check was created?
Yes, ma'am. The check was created on February 5th, 2010 at 12:29 p.m. The type was check. No check number associated yet. The date is 2/4/2010. The amount is $6,505. Check status or printed status is to be printed. Memo is balance SA 1001. Made out to Charles Merritt.
Showing you the second page of that document. Can you tell us what occurs in the indirect edit of the audit history?
Yes, at 12:29. A check number is associated at 4097, and the check was printed.
And then what's the last part of the audit history with respect to this check?
At 12:38 on February 5th, the check was deleted.
Did you have any information as to whether this check had been cashed?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Do you have your report?
Yes, can I refer to it?
If it would refresh your recollection with the court's permission?
Sure.
Did you need to see the specifics of this for your report?
No, I believe I can find it from the email. Okay.
Did that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Was that check cashed?
The check was deposited on February 5th at Bank of America.
I'm going to show you 434. You can tell me what's contained, when this check was created.
On February 5th, 2010 at 12:33, user Joseph McStay added a check with the date of 2/4/2010 in the amount of $2,350. Lighting install SA 1001 made out to Charles Mary.
And looking at the indirect history with respect to this check, can you tell me what occurs in the audit history?
Yes, on February 5th, 2010 at 12:33, the check was given a number 4096 and printed.
And if you can tell us what happens in the next page of the audit history.
Yes, the check number was deleted and the status was to be printed.
And what happens at the last stage of the audit history with respect to this transaction?
On February 5th, 2010 at 12:37, the check was deleted.
I'll show you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 420I for identification purposes. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what that is?
Yes, it's a computer-generated check from Earth Inspired Products paid to Charles Mary, dated February 4th, 2010, in the amount of $2,350. The memo is lighting install SA 1001 in parentheses.
And were you able to determine if this check had been cashed?
Yes, it was.
So this contains the same information that we saw in the previous exhibit, 434, correct?
That's right.
And do we see the date difference again as well?
Yes, ma'am. The date on the check was 2/4.
And is there a different check number with respect to this than what we saw in the QuickBooks history?
That's correct. The check, the physical check number is 4242.
And then showing you created
On February 8th, 2010, at 2:20 p.m., user Joseph McStay added a check dated 2/4/2010 in the amount of $6,500. The status was to be printed. The memo was Saudi Arabia final, and it was made out to Charles Mary.
Moving on to the second page of that, can you tell us what happens with the indirect edit here?
There's a check number associated, 4096, and at 2:22, the check was printed.
If you can tell us what happens at the last indirect edit there?
The edit at 2:24 deleted the check number, and then there was one more edit on this check.
And what is the final part of that actual transaction history?
At 2:25, the check was deleted.
And showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 420H for identification purposes. Can you tell me what that is?
Yes, ma'am, it was a computer-generated check from Earth Inspired Products paid to the order of Charles Merritt for $6,500, dated February 4th, 2010. And that was for the Saudi Arabia final, $6,500.
Okay, just a few moments ago, you looked at a different audit history for a check for $6,505. and indicated that you believed it was cashed. Were there a couple of checks that were around the same dollar amount?
Yes.
Okay, and we know that if you take a look at this one, can you tell if this one was cashed?
Yes, it was.
So is it possible you were incorrect when you said that the other check for $6,505 was cashed?
Yeah, I could have made a mistake there.
And in looking at this, what's the significance in terms of the date with respect to this?
This also has the date of 2/4/2010.
And when was the audit history for this check?
This-
And is there a different check number associated with this as well?
Yes, on the physical check, it is 4241.
Now, when you went through that particular bank account or the actual custom account, we went through some exhibits right now where we see that first check that was deposited. Were there any other checks that were written from that account prior to those checks that we just went through?
There were no checks written from the custom side prior to February 1st, 2010.
When you reviewed that information that was contained within the custom account and the contact account, was there anything significant to you in terms of the way that vendor lists were done?
Yes.
What was significant to you?
Objection asked and answered.
When you went through the information on the custom side of the account, was there anything significant to you in terms of the vendor list?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
Did you review any other checks that had been created in lowercase format?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. On that side of the account, did you review any other checks besides the ones to Metro Sheet Metal and Charles Merritt that had been created in a lowercase format?
I'm sorry, on the contact side?
On the custom side.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question?
Okay. When you reviewed the checks for Charles Merritt and Metro Sheet Metal that were created on the custom side, was there something significant about them to you?
Yes.
What was significant about them?
All the vendors were lowercase letters.
And did you see that type of creation of checks on the contact side?
No, the contact side, the checks were the first letter of the name. For example, my name, first name is Daniel, so the D would be capitalized, A-N-I-E-L would be lowercase. My last name is Hanke, so if there was a check on that side, my H would be capitalized and the rest would be lowercase. So the only capitalization was on the first, it was properly capitalized.
So then just to put the information in here with respect to the checks that you had actually observed, first checks were written on which date?
On the custom account,
Yes.
February 1st, 2010,
Okay, so if I write first checks to, and who are those written to?
Charles Merritt.
Okay. Is that accurate if we put first check to Charles Merritt on QuickBooks?
Yes.
Okay, and when was the next date that checks were written?
On the 2nd.
And is that accurate? Second checks written to Charles Merritt on QuickBooks.
Yes.
Okay, and when were the next checks written?
The 4th.
Okay, and is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And when were the next checks written?
The 5th.
And were those the checks that were backdated?
Yes.
So if we write checks written to Charles Merritt backdated to February 4th, is that correct?
Checks were written on the 5th. I won't have to review my notes as far as to Charles Merritt. I know checks were written to Metro Sheet Metal on the 5th.
Okay, can you check and see so we can make sure it's accurate?
Yes.
And then we can add Metro Sheet Metal
If I could refer to my report, please.
with the court's permission?
Sure.
Okay.
Did that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Were there checks written to him on the 5th?
Yes, there were.
Okay, and so we'll add Metro Sheet Metal. And those were also backdated, is that correct?
Yes, they were dated for the 4th.
And then when were the next checks written?
On February 8th,
Okay, and who were those two?
Charles Merritt.
And were those also backdated to the 4th?
Yes.
Okay, does that look correct?
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions at this time.
We'll take our afternoon recess 15 minutes before we start cross-examination. Keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you on the form, or express any opinions about the case, now to discuss the case. We'll see everyone back in about 15 minutes.